नमस्कार दोस्तों। अमेरिका के एक भूतपूर्व नेशनल सिक्योरिटी एडवाइजर और सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट रहे हेनरी किसिंगर, उन्होंने एक बार कहा था कि इट विल बी डेंजरस टू बी अमेरिकाज एनिमी बट टू बी अमेरिकाज फ्रेंड इज फैटल। और शायद ये शब्द आज भारत और अमेरिका की स्थिति को देखते हुए बिल्कुल सटीक लग रहे हैं। और शायद ये भी लग रहा है कि क्या भारत को आज अमेरिका से दोस्ती भारी पड़ रही है। भारी इसलिए क्योंकि अमेरिका के पावरफुल राष्ट्रपति सर डोनाल्ड ट्रंप ने भारतीय निर्यात पर 50% टैरिफ लगा दिया है। और अभी वो कह रहे हैं कि और भी आगे इंतजार कीजिए, क्या हो सकता है। तो अब ऐसे हालात में ये देखना दिलचस्प होगा कि ऊंट किस करवट बैठेगा। क्या भारत अमेरिका के सामने झुकेगा या फिर वो ब्रिक्स के देशों और खासकर रशिया और चीन के साथ दोस्ती बढ़ाएगा, कि जैसे अब लग भी रहा है कि मोदी जी अब वहां जा रहे हैं। तो उसी को देखते हुए हमको देखना है कि इसके दूरगामी प्रभाव क्या होंगे। और उसी चीजों को के लिए चर्चा करने के लिए आज हमारे साथ अमेरिका के भूतपूर्व डिप्लोमेट जोनाथन वार्ड हमारे साथ हैं। और जोनाथन वार्ड 2014 से 2019 तक यूएस एम्बेसी में इंडिया में काम कर चुके हैं और उनका वो सफर बहुत ही रोमांचकारी अनुभवों से गुजरा है। जॉन, वेलकम फॉर ज्वाइनिंग अस on this platform of Indian Achievers, and we are really thankful for agreeing to share your sweet, bitter experiences and your thoughts on present Trump's tariff war with India. You are most welcome.
Thank you very much, Rajiv.
You are very welcome. Okay, let us start with your brief about yourself and your experiences back there in India when you were in India, in New Delhi and Kolkata from 2014 to 2018, I think so.
Yes. Thank you, Rajiv. And it indeed was my pleasure to serve at the U.S. Embassy from 2014 to 2015. And then I shifted to become the principal commercial officer at the U.S. Consulate General in Kolkata, where I spent 3 years. And all of my time in India was spent as a commercial officer, helping U.S. companies to export into India and also facilitating Indian investment into the United States. But at the same time, having worked prior to my arrival in India at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative in the Office for South Asia, I had a good look at U.S. trade policy vis-a-vis India and the rest of South Asia from a bilateral perspective, both U.S. exports to India and Indian exports to the United States. And now I enjoy retirement in my hometown of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, USA.
Mm-hmm. Okay, share some, memorable, some good or bad, sweet or bitter experiences. And because, India is also a different kind of a word, right? It's not a country with a people of 140 billion, right? So you must be having some memorable experiences which you would be loving to share with our audience.
Of course. Thank you, Rajiv. And, we agreed to entitle this Incredible India because of India's longstanding advertising campaign and slogan. Most Americans, if they think of India, if they're of a certain age and remember those advertisements, they think Incredible India. But yet, not many Americans travel to India. And why is that? And as I think all of your viewers know, internationally, India has maybe a reputation for being just a very poor country, but it's so much more than that. And until you go to India, you don't truly understand how vibrant it is, how the growing middle class is so powerful in its abilities to meet world demands for services and, of course, for products that it exports around the world. In my 4 years, approximately, in India, I had the opportunity, both for work and for pleasure, to visit about 15 states. So I think about half of the states of India that I had the privilege to visit. And I certainly agree. I mean, we know that India wasn't a single entity until the British came. So when a foreigner like myself gets to travel across India, and again, I only got to half the states, we are amazed at the diversity of culture, the richness of the culture and the people of India. Everywhere I went, the people were so warm and friendly and very welcoming. They wanted to share their culture with me, and it was just such a pleasure. Now, when you say bitter moments, of course, India has challenges, just like the United States has challenges. When I go outside my apartment here in Milwaukee, there's a possibility that somebody, a homeless person on the street, will ask me for money.
Mm-hmm.
And the same way in India, we see, people struggling on the streets. So these problems exist across the world, and it's not fair to say that, one country is handling it worse than another country is handling this kind of challenge.
Okay, in what other ways that America is different with India? If we talk about, if we consider, political structure or the social or the cultural or as a whole society.
Well, of course, the one thing that we have in common politically is we're both vibrant democracies. The United States is called the oldest democracy. India is called the largest democracy. Mm-hmm. So, that we very much have in common. But, when we think of history, of course, India's cultures, and I say cultures, plural, are so much older than U.S. culture. Does the U.S. date back to 1776 or earlier or later? Doesn't matter the exact date, but we're going to celebrate our 250th year as a nation. Now, of course, that's not factoring in that there were human beings here 10,000 years before, and that European immigrants who I'm descended from conquered the territory and took it from the indigenous people. So there was culture here for 10,000 years, but American or U.S. culture exists maximum 250 years as a nation, whereas India's culture goes back millennia. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one significant difference between our countries. And then, of course, the food, the music, the spiritual traditions. Hinduism is growing in the United States as more Indians migrate here, but we don't have that as a major part of our culture, nor do we have Islam as a major part of our culture. So your two major spiritual groups, and of course I should not ignore Jains or Sikhs or all the other spiritual groups in India, they all exist here. But of course the United States is historically a majority Christian nation. And I think that affects our politics and certainly where people go on Sunday morning to worship, or on Saturday if they're, we also have a larger Jewish population than India. Of course, India had Jews in many parts of the country, but they have largely left. So there are many spiritual, religious, political differences as well. And of course, you have a prime minister Narendra Modi, while we have a president, Donald Trump. So many differences. But one thing that I learned when people ask what I learned as a diplomat working in many countries, including Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Brazil, is that fundamentally people are the same everywhere in that they want peace, they want to be able to prosper and create a better life for their families, and if they have children, a better future for their children. And this is the same in the United States and in India.
Yes. Okay, now that we have a very large population of Indians in America, and they have mixed up with the American culture, and they are just contributing to the growth of America and their economy, and they are the one of the highest taxpayers in America. So now let us come back to the current scenario. What is happening between India and America since Operation Sindoor? You know, the Trump government has imposed 50% tariff on Indian exports. So my question to you, how do you see it? Do you think that this is a good step taken by Donald Trump? Or will it really benefit America, or what is behind it?
Yes, thank you, Rajiv. And I'm not in the U.S. government anymore, so of course I'm not privy. I'm not aware of all of the conversations that happen. And of course, I speak in my personal capacity, not as a former government official. But having worked for many years on our bilateral relationship, and many American political and diplomatic leaders have worked tirelessly for decades with our Indian counterparts in government to build our relationship between our countries. And our global system very much relies on free trade. Now, of course, two sovereign nations, India is a sovereign nation, the United States is a sovereign nation, and they should respect each other's sovereignty. Two nations are going to have disagreements. For example, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, there are two gentlemen from the past, Mr. Harley and Mr. Davidson. And in a shack, they started a motorcycle company, Harley Davidson. And it's long been a contentious issue. What is the Indian tariff on motorcycles exported from the United States to India? Of course. And issues with agricultural access. These are things that I worked on constructively in a deliberate manner with India, with Indian government officials for many years. And that is how diplomacy should work. Consistent, deliberate negotiation. But imposing a 50% tariff across the board, that is not, in my view, how diplomacy should be conducted. We know that India has very dynamic entrepreneurs. And these entrepreneurs create products and services that American consumers desire. So American consumers should have the opportunity to access those goods and services at a fair price. Now, a 50% tariff, of course, makes those goods and services less desirable.
So do you think that it will increase the prices, the retail prices of the items, especially which are coming from India?
Oh, yes. And it's a misconception. And sometimes President Trump says, well, India will pay for this. No. If you know what a tariff is, and I know you do,
yes,
you know that the importer of record pays that when it comes to the port of entry.
Yes.
And that importer has to decide whether to pass that increased cost onto the consumer.
Yes.
They may choose, for competitive purposes, to not pass any of it, in which case it's their profit that is affected.
Yes.
Or they may choose to pass a portion of it on, or all of it on. That is a business decision. So will the consumer pay more? Well, in some cases, no. But in many cases, of course, the consumer will pay more for that good that comes to the United States.
Okay, my question, have you worked under Trump government?
Well, of course, I worked under the first Trump administration,
Mm-hmm.
but I chose to retire in June of 2020, but more for personal reasons because I had become eligible for retirement at that point. So I certainly worked under the first Trump administration, but I retired in 2020.
Okay, so it means you have worked a little bit with the Trump government and as well with the Democrats, right? So,
Yes.
because you have spent all your life with the government, you know, so you must be having some real idea what would be the reality behind it. Means why he got so annoyed, and he used to say that he's the biggest friend of Modi, and they are going together. But now suddenly things have changed. Can you just tell us, our viewers, what exactly might have happened for this reason?
Well, of course, we know that India's relationship with Russia, does have geopolitical implications. And we know from history that, the U.S. had chosen in the past to ally with Pakistan, and that has affected things. But we also know that India has become much closer to the United States. In fact, when I was in Delhi, responsible for the defense sector exports, U.S. government support for defense sector exports to India, I helped Boeing to, win a contract to sell Apache attack helicopters to the Indian government.
Okay.
And this, of course, is very good for the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But India still needs to source weapons from Russia and needs to source or chooses to source oil from Russia at bargain prices, and that's good for India. But President Trump now, and when you say President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, had a good relationship, well, President Trump and Vladimir Putin also had what appeared to be a close relationship. So President Trump did make a campaign promise to end the Ukraine war in his first day in office.
Yes.
Now, clearly, that was a campaign slogan and was not going to be delivered unless he had made an arrangement ahead of time. Just like President Reagan got the hostages back from Iran in his first day because he had negotiated it behind the scenes ahead of time. So certainly President Trump is frustrated that he cannot end the war in Ukraine. And he blames Vladimir Putin for that. He also blames Zelensky for that.
But now he's also blaming India, that India is funding this war.
Yes.
Do you agree with
And
that?
I think, and that is clearly the reason why he has put in place a 50% tariff that also could increase, right?
Mm-hmm. And you must be knowing it that there was a press conference just a couple of days back in the White House, and one journalist asked him that besides India, even America is also buying a lot of things from Russia, and they are doing business worth billions of dollars. In that response, Trump says that I don't know, I will come back to you. How do you take it?
Well, that's certainly the response that I would expect. It's we as diplomats, we're trained to divert when we can. So I'm not surprised at that response. He chose to not really answer the question, and of course, the reporter's question was based in truth. So, we know that.
Okay, you have spent 4 years in India. What do you think? You must have, because in 2014, Modi had come back, right? So what do you think that Modi will bow to this American arm twisting tactics, or do you think that they will stand eye to eye with him?
India is, by many accounts, the largest country in population in the world.
Mhm.
One of the fastest growing GDPs in the world. Before colonialism, China accounted for about 1/3 of world GDP. India accounted for about 1/3 of world GDP, and the rest, the last third. So India is historically a very powerful country, as if we say it was a country, a region. And I believe that India will just continue to grow in economic power, military power, and political power. And the United States, China, other countries need to understand that and accept that this growth is inevitable. And Prime Minister Modi, as the leader of a country that's growing in influence, he needs to be a leader of a powerful country. Now, whether or not he compromises, I can't say if that will happen. I don't know what leverage President Trump will, more leverage that President Trump will try to impose on India. But certainly for domestic political concerns and international prestige, I would think that Prime Minister Modi is going to, for the most part, stand his ground in this. But then he will have to measure what is the impact on India's exporters of this increased tariff.
Okay. Okay, my question is, you were principal commercial officer, right? So you have the complete knowledge about the business. Suppose India, Russia, China, South Africa, and Brazil join hands as a BRICS, right? And they start doing business in their own new BRICS currency. Do you see any possibility, real possibility in it, or how it will affect America's interest?
Yes, certainly, U.S. power peaked at the end of World War II. The United States was the only clear winner politically and economically of that war.
Mm-hmm.
So it was only natural that in relative terms, U.S. power would decline from that point, naturally. How that proceeds, how quickly that proceeds, it's hard to say. And as I pointed out before, when you think of the I and the C, India and China naturally should be the richest countries in the world because of their size.
Mm-hmm.
Brazil. I also served in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and I love Brazil. And it has underperformed historically, but has great potential to grow. Russia, of course, is on the decline, both in terms of population, vibrancy, lots of reasons. And then you can add other countries to the mix. Now, the BRICS, that's not a natural group of countries, other than they are not the United States, they're not the West. I don't see, President Lula of Brazil really being a warm friend of Prime Minister Modi in India.
Yes.
Or leadership of China. And certainly India and China are not close friends. So I don't ever see there being a common currency between those countries, or really, a long-term alliance. Of course, nations don't have allies. They have interests, mutual interests. and those come and they go.
Mhm.
So while as individual countries, the BRICS will, other than I think Russia, will increase in relative strength. And the U.S. will decline in relative strength. I don't see the BRICS, and this is just in my opinion, being a, block that's going to hold together. There'll be cooperation and there'll be disagreement, just like between any other countries.
Okay, if we see Mr. Trump's past some actions, which he revoked after imposing more than 100% tax on China, but he revoked it, right? So, do you think that there is any possibility that he might do the same thing with India in these coming days?
As I said earlier, I can't tell what other leverage President Trump is going to try to use.
Mm-hmm.
I would not be surprised if he threatened a 100% or 200% tariff, which I
Mm-hmm.
believe he's threatened against pharmaceutical imports, which, of course, are a very major export of India to the United States.
Mm-hmm. So, when you were in India, I think that Democrats were here, right?
You mean Democrats in power in the United
Yes,
States?
yes, yes.
Um, wow, now you're testing my knowledge of history.
No,
I
no, 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 no.
arrived.
No, no, no. Trump has come in
Yes,
2025. Before that, Biden was there, right? And before that, Trump was there, right? So
yes.
mostly you worked when the Trump was the prime minister, right? Oh, president,
Uh,
sorry.
well, the first Trump term started, and now I've got to do my math in 2016. So I was in India before that. Uh,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. So do you see any kind of difference between this Mr. Trump and the Biden government, as far as running the country with the keeping the best interest of the people?
You're speaking of interests of the United States, of of U.S. citizens.
No, no, no. I'm just
Or India.
talking about the your comparative study between the Trump's rule and the Biden rule.
Well, that's a question of domestic politics. And, I'm here to talk about my experience as a diplomat, working
No,
on our
no. I'm just talking
bilateral.
about the foreign policies.
Oh, the foreign policies. Well,
Yes.
um, I served the U.S. government from 1986 to 2020, 34 years of
Hmm.
U.S. government service. So I served every U.S. president from Ronald Reagan to Donald Trump,
Okay.
Democrats and Republicans. And while I have my own political beliefs, as a U.S. government official, you must be prepared to serve whatever president is in power. And of course, when we take our oath of office, we swear to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, not, a single president. Although, as long as that president is following the Constitution as a U.S. government employee, we must support the president.
Okay.
Um, and, there is great disagreement in our country about changes that President Trump has made. As a progressive or a liberal, I personally do not support many of President Trump's initiatives. But then, there have been initiatives of Democrats in foreign policy that I did also did not support. If you like to ask some specific questions, I might be able to address specific issues, but that's broadly my perspective.
Okay. One question. Uh, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi said in the Parliament that no third country interfered or asked India to cease fire with Pakistan. Even yesterday, even in the White House, their press secretary specifically said that this is Donald Trump who mediated and stopped this war. What do you say?
Well, again, no longer being in government, I don't know exactly, how
No, no, no,
that
no.
situation.
Our government has specifically and openly in the parliament has said so. So,
Yes.
whom would you believe more, your president or our prime minister?
Well, knowing Donald Trump's history of making claims, I personally do not put a lot of credence or believe much of what President Trump says about his accomplishments. So, as an observer, perhaps a better informed observer than some, less than others, I would tend to, believe what your government is saying or what the Indian government is saying.
Okay. So, do you think that there will be some kind of agreement or some kind of adjustment between each other for the interest of the countries as far as business is concerned?
That's a very good question, and if I had a crystal ball and could predict the future, I would be living on my private island somewhere, and make the right bets on Wall Street. It's really hard to say. Of course, the new Trump tariffs went into effect globally. I think was it yesterday or the day before. So I know they're in place. I am certain that they will bring global GDP growth down, if not cause recessions in many countries or a global recession. But it's very difficult to say, given President Trump's history of decision making, it's impossible to say where he's going to go from there.
Okay.
Certainly, this will have a big impact on what we call our midterms, the congressional elections coming up next year. And, from a personal political analysis position, I would say that Republicans are going to slowly start to distance themselves from many of President Trump's initiatives.
Oh,
Whether that will affect the president, who is essentially lame duck because he can't run for reelection, or at least the Constitution says that he can't.
yes. But he's
Um,
trying. Mhm.
yeah,
Okay. So my last question. This increase in the tariff, how seriously it will affect the common Americans in America?
it depends what that average American consumer, citizen, resident, what do they buy? What package of goods do they buy?
No, no,
Whether or
I'm
not,
sorry. I'm sorry. He has also imposed on Brazil, it is started today, 50% on them, right? And
yes,
many other countries have also increased. So, how
yes.
do you see the impact on common American
Oh,
citizens?
well, so of course, a tariff can only make prices go up for the average citizen. Um, and U.S. companies or foreign companies, they're not going to make a decision to move manufacturing until they're certain that that tariff regime is going to be long term. And with President Trump leaving office, excuse me, in about 3.5 years, maybe they'll choose to wait that out. So I don't think that there'll be a lot more jobs moving to the U.S. So wages won't go up because jobs are coming back. In the meantime, prices will go up. In fact, President Trump, when introducing these concepts, he told the American people that there would be short-term pain. To date, there has not been, but that's because the tariffs have not been in place. I believe that Americans will start very soon to feel more and more pain as prices for different goods from countries around the world go up. And once Americans start feeling that pain, if they then assign blame to the appropriate party, Republicans will suffer. And we see special elections in the U.S. We see Democrats overperforming, meaning they're doing much better than they regularly would. And I believe that's due to tariffs and other issues. We'll see. We have two gubernatorial or elections for governors of states coming up this year in Virginia and in New Jersey. And I know, Rajiv, you track both of those very closely. If Democrats win resoundingly in those two states, Republicans will panic. And then we'll see that distancing in policies grow faster. Because if there's one thing I know that a member of Congress wants, it's to be reelected.
Okay. Okay. तो दोस्तों, ये थे जोनाथन वार्ड जो आज हमारे साथ चर्चा कर रहे थे भारत और अमेरिका के रिश्तों पर। और इनकी बातों से साफ लगता है कि निजी तौर पर ये भी उतना खुश नहीं है एक अमेरिकी नागरिक के रूप में जितना कि होना चाहिए था। मैं चाहूंगा कि आप अपनी टिप्पणियों से हमें भी अवगत कराएं कि आप क्या सोचते हैं कि ये जो अब लड़ाई एक शुरू हुई है, आर्थिक लड़ाई जो शुरू हुई है, ये कहां जाकर रुकेगी। सो थैंक यू जॉन, थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर कमिंग एंड ज्वाइनिंग अस। थैंक यू।
Thank you very much, Rajiv.
Namaste. Namaste.
Namaskar from Kolkata.
Okay.